In today's video, we're going to be discussing a potential blockbuster trade between the Edmonton Oilers and San Jose Sharks involving Erik Karlsson in the offseason. What are the odds it can happen? How could it work? Could the Oilers pull that off? We'll discuss that possibility. Plus, as Chicago captain Jonathan Toews seriously considering retirement. Plus, we also have some updates on top prospect Connor Bedard breaking more records across Canadian hockey and junior, plus another signing in Detroit. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about today. Obviously, we're back here with a later video. It's been a crazy busy weekend for myself, away coaching in a tournament, and just kind of getting back and trying to get caught up here on the news. We'll be back to normal postings starting tomorrow. For the foreseeable future, signing in Detroit, we have a prospect, Antti Tuomisto, who's a 2019 second-round pick. He's a right-shot defenseman, of course, another European player. But a really big size, 6'4", 195. Spent 2 years playing in North America at the University of Denver. Went back over to Europe this year. Played for TPS in Liga. Had a real solid season. Looks like a real solid defensive prospect. The Red Wings are certainly known for finding their prospects a little bit outside of the first round. This is not unusual for them. They've gone to Europe numerous times, especially on the back end. This is really a potential great find. I really think this prospect's going to be an interesting player. That the Red Wings fans especially need to keep an eye on here as this kicks in next season. So this is a 3-year ELC starting in 23-24 for next year. So the expectation is they'll likely make the jump back to North America, at least I believe right now, but we'll see what the plan is for sure once we have more information on this player. But good prospect signing for sure. Connor Bedard, the projected #1 overall pick. There's no doubt this is going to be the case. I mean, honestly, this is not a situation where we're going to get to the draft in June and whoever gets lucky enough to be picking first overall calls an audible here and goes with a different player. There's just absolutely zero chance that's going to happen. But Connor Bedard continues to break record and put himself in line to be one of the top, or if not one of the more recent great first overall picks in NHL history here. Scored his 70th goal of the season tonight in his 55th game. So that's a phenomenal thing. Just to show you how this guy really compares and how special Bedard is projected to be. Looking back at some previous #1 picks who played in the Canadian Major Junior Hockey League. Looking back, for example, Sidney Crosby, when he was the same age, scored 66 goals. So he's got even more goals than Crosby did at that age. Patrick Kane, of course, American-born player that came up and played in the OHL, scored 62 goals. Steven Stamkos, who was #1 overall, is on an awesome career at the Lightning, captain, top center, phenomenal Stanley Cup champion. He had 58 goals. John Tavares, of course, current captain of the Maple Leafs, has a solid career as well. He had 58 goals as well at the same age. Connor McDavid, who's arguably the best player in the world today, had 44. Now, of course, I don't know if it's always fair. I don't think it's fair at all, really, to compare McDavid and Bedard. They're completely different types of players. I do think that Connor Bedard, in my opinion, and I'm not really an expert per se, but I mean, I have watched Bedard a fair bit. I do pay very close attention to Canadian junior hockey, especially. I always watch the World Juniors and a fair bit of other junior hockey throughout the season. And in my opinion, I think Connor Bedard is going to be the top #1 overall pick since McDavid. I don't know that he's going to have more of an impact on the game than McDavid. But like I said, they're different types of players. I don't know if it's fair to really compare the two. He likely is going to be a more pure goal scorer than McDavid is. Good skater, but McDavid's skating is lights out, so strong, right? Like the things he can do, not only with the skating, but at the high speed, the stick handling and the plays he can make. I'm not sure that Bedard's going to be quite the same that way, but this is a incredibly special player who is going to be a franchise-altering pick. Whoever is fortunate enough, if you look at teams near the bottom of the standings that could get that, whether it's like the Sharks, the Ducks, the Blackhawks, the Blue Jackets, the Flyers, any of these teams, even Montreal, Vancouver to some degree will be in that mix too. Like, this is going to be a tremendous draft coming up this summer. Just to give you a little bit of context, it's been well over 25 years since any Canadian or players, not just Canadian, because you get more than just Canadian players, like in the CHL, have hit this kind of goal total. You're looking back to like Muriel, for example, who was obviously one of the greatest of all time. Arguably right up there with Wayne Gretzky, had 104 goals in his same season at the same age, back in the 80s. And it's rare. I think Pat LaFontaine had more than 70, and that's about it. He's an incredibly rare, special company. Like, whoever gets this player is going to be so fortunate. Bedard setting records again, and just kind of building his case to be, a generational type first overall pick, at least in my honest opinion. Chicago Blackhawks captain Jonathan Toews reportedly seriously considering retirement, and is, according to these reports, leaning more and more towards it all the time. No given that it's 100% decision made yet. I know last time head coach Luke Richardson was asked about it, he said that Toews was chomping at the bit to try and take the next step to work towards getting back. But these reports come from newspaper in Chicago. I've seen other reports through Yahoo Sports and other places claiming that there's multiple sources out there saying that Jonathan Toews, after what he's been going through with his long COVID issue, is, it's a real possibility. Now, of course, we know that his contract expires with the Blackhawks. We know that he was not traded at the deadline, and that was because of the fact that he's been out, and he put a statement out as well, along with the Blackhawks, indicating that he was not going to waive his no-move clause because he did not feel that if another team traded for him, that he would really be able to play and contribute, and it wasn't fair to them to, have the expectation that he could go there and be helpful when he wasn't thinking that he could. That the illness and all the symptoms he has been suffering from as part of this battle with long COVID, it's just too much to deal with right now, which is why he stepped away from the team and has been out for an extended period of time. So, considering how much time he's missed in the past couple of years since dealing with this, it would be shocking if this became true and the career of Jonathan Toews was over. I honestly don't think it would be. It's unfortunate. It's kind of sad for any player to not call their own shot and go out on their own terms here. But, Toews has had a phenomenal career. He's got over 1,000 games played, 880 points, 3 Stanley Cups, 2 Olympic gold, World Junior gold. Like, this guy has done it all. Nicknamed him Captain Serious, known for his, leadership that he's shown, within his teams that he's been on over the course of his career. This guy doesn't really have anything to be upset about. He's made a ton of money. His latest contract that's expiring was like $84 million, I think it was total. So, from that perspective at least, he can go out with his head held high. But at the same time, like I said, players want to be able to do their own thing and, when they're ready, retire and call their own shot. And this seems like a real possibility here. Now, could things change? We'll have to wait and see until he announces his retirement and confirms this. It's just a rumor, but there is some legit sources out there claiming this to be the case. So we'll see. Hopefully it's not the end, but if it is, like I said, he's had a great career, and I hope that regardless if he plays or he doesn't play, that from a quality of life perspective and everything he's going through, that he can make some progress and things could get better, because he hates seeing anybody suffer long term, especially somebody who's still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. And, for the most part, who's, an athletic person like him who should be in such good shape, it doesn't always make sense. But unfortunately, there are some things in life, especially when it comes to health and medical stuff, that doesn't make sense. And this is certainly one of them. And it's tough to deal with. So I want to wish him the best, regardless of what his decision is moving forward. Now, could we see a blockbuster trade where Erik Karlsson in the offseason, ultimately sending him to Edmonton? Now, this is something we talked about leading up to the deadline. There was some strong, consensus out there in the rumor mill amongst the NHL insiders that the Oilers were very seriously interested in acquiring the likely Norris Trophy winning defenseman for this season. Now, Erik Karlsson is having a career season, a resurgence of his career, if you will. We saw him win multiple Norris Trophies, made the game's top D-man, setting up, all kinds of, accolades, offensively especially, during his time with the Ottawa Senators. Since he's been with San Jose, even towards the end of his time in Ottawa, not that he wasn't a good defenseman anymore, but it's fair to say he had regressed. And I think a lot of that had to do with injuries that he had suffered.
That Achilles injury and heel injury he suffered in the 2017 Eastern Conference Final playoff run with the Senators really seemed to take a major bite out of him. And after he came back and recovered, he, like I said, he was still a good defenseman, but he certainly wasn't quite the same. Now, for whatever reason, things have gotten better. He's rebounded. He's obviously older. He's making a ton of money. The contract alone makes things incredibly complicated to get a deal done. When you're making over $11 million and there's so many NHL teams tied up against the cap with no space or into the LTIR pool, it makes it incredibly, incredibly difficult. Now, at this point, we don't know yet exactly what the salary cap increase is going to be for July 1st. It could be $1 million, which is not going to be overly helpful to the Oilers to get a deal like this done or any other team looking to make moves this offseason. But there is a possibility, because we've heard Gary Bettman say he's willing to discuss at least and negotiate a bit with the NHLPA to see what they can do to maybe bump that up a little bit more, even though their escrow is not scheduled, or at least looking like it's going to be completely repaid, and the terms of the agreement they made because of the pandemic stuff is not going to be completely settled with. Now, but all that aside, could the Oilers figure things out to get this done anyway? Looking at a recent article in The Athletic from Erik Karlsson, he explains how this is possible. This actually makes a lot of sense. Now, for starters, the San Jose Sharks, especially if they trade Karlson, will likely go into more of a rebuild mode. Now, we've seen NHL reporters and insiders say recently that they weren't yet convinced, especially Elliot Friedman, who's well connected, that he's not entirely convinced yet that the Sharks are going to go into a deep rebuild. It seems like they may want to do more of a retool. While getting the Karlson contract off the books would be a major start to that, it might send them more into a rebuild mode than it would otherwise if they can't find a trade for him. Because if they have that kind of contract and the kind of player in their roster, they're probably going to go about things a little bit differently. But if you think about this, the Edmonton Oilers have a contract on their books now that has not worked out for them. And it's goaltender Jack Campbell, who signed for 5 years at $5 million a year. This is only the first season, but he already lost his job early in the year to Stuart Skinner. And really, the Oilers at this point probably would not mind moving on from the Jack Campbell contract. So if you can talk to San Jose, who has shown some, based on the reports we've seen, some interest to retain a little bit of money, but probably not too much given the amount of term on it, let's say they retain $2 million. Okay, so you knock that salary of Karlson from Edmonton's perspective down to like $9.5 million. Okay, so you have that now. You move Jack Campbell as part of a trade to the Sharks. Sharks have had goaltending issues. There's uncertainty within that position within the team on who's going to be their long-term goaltender. Maybe they're willing to take the Jack Campbell contract, have a goalie under contract for the next 4 years at a reasonable salary, and maybe they can work with him to see if they can help him find his game on a more consistent basis again. So let's say they include Jack Campbell to San Jose. So there's $5 million coming off of Edmonton's book. Okay, you've already got the Sharks to retain $2 million. So that's $7 million. You're only $2.5 million short of doing a swap in and out. So that salary cap wise, you're not really, it's evening out here. Okay, so maybe you trade another defenseman, because obviously with Erik Karlsson coming in, he's gonna take a top spot from another player. Okay, so if you look at him being your number one right shot defenseman, while you still have Evan Bouchard in the mix. Okay, Evan Bouchard's gonna be your number 2 right shot defenseman. So then you still got Cody Ceci and you get Vincent Desharnais. I think Desharnais has been a nice find for the Oilers. He's been a good surprise this year. I think they'd be good with him on the third pair. So maybe Cody Ceci becomes expendable. Okay, maybe Warren Fogle in the forward group is expendable. You move one of those two guys either in this trade or in a separate deal, and you've now freed up enough space between Campbell going to San Jose eating a little bit of money, and now the money has evened out. Edmonton can easily get Erik Karlsson, but is the Sharks going to trade Erik Karlsson straight up for Jack Campbell? Not a chance. There's no way that's happening. So obviously the Oilers have to give them something worth their while. So you're probably talking at least a couple of solid prospects. Maybe they trade Philip Broberg, because to be honest, you've already got Evan Bouchard in there. You're bringing in Erik Karlsson. You're going to box out another young defensemen from getting a bigger role. If they want Karlsson, maybe Broberg has to go. That doesn't mean they don't like Broberg, but at the end of the day, something has to give. They have to give up something of value. They also have another prospect like Xavier Bergeau, maybe Raphael Lavoie, who's made good progress recently. Maybe some of these other prospects could be included. You give them a couple of those guys, okay, that's going to get things interesting. You might have to include a draft pick in there as well. But those are the pieces, along with a guy like Campbell or a CC or a Fogle, that can make this work. It's not unreasonable and unrealistic to think that the Edmonton Oilers could pull off this kind of trade. But it might have been a little bit too complicated for them to pull off at the NHL trade deadline. But in the offseason, when you have a little bit more cap flexibility, you have expiring contracts, especially when you're around the time of the NHL draft, before teams spend a bunch of money on free agency, that would be the more ideal time to have any real legit chance to move a contract like this. And I think that they could have the best chance to get it done. So let me know your thoughts on a potential Erik Karlsson blockbuster deal to the Edmonton Oilers. Is this a deal you think makes sense for the San Jose Sharks? Is this a deal that makes sense for the Edmonton Oilers? They would certainly have a very expensive blue line with Erik Karlsson, Darnell Nurse, Matthias Ekholm, and others back there. But is that the way to go? I think a lot of this will depend on how the Oilers do this postseason. If they were, for example, to win a Stanley Cup, they might go about things completely differently. It might not view Erik Karlsson as being the missing piece if they're the eventual champions. If we see the Edmonton Oilers, not get too far in the playoffs, they're going to want to make another addition to go back at another year with this mostly the same group to try to go for another victory here. So let me know your thoughts on if this is the right move, what the mock trade could look like to make it good for both sides. Down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.